I still remember the moment as if it were carved into my skin, a scar that refuses to fade. The living room was too bright that night, the lamps casting an unforgiving glow on every corner. I stood frozen, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear, while his daughter, the 20-year-old who had never once seen me as anything other than a rival, looked at her father with wide, trembling eyes. "She's lying, Dad. She's always hated me." Those words slithered out of her mouth with a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. My husband, my partner of years, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, watched me like I was already guilty. I could feel the ground give way beneath me. His gaze was cold, detached, a mirror of the love he once gave me, but now offered to her without question. I wanted to scream, to demand that he stop, that he look at me, that he remember who I was to him. But my voice came out small, trembling. "What are you saying? You're throwing me out because she told you something." He didn't even flinch. "Alina, just pack your things. I can't do this anymore." Just like that. No defense, no chance to explain, no faith in the woman who had built a life with him. His decision was as merciless as the slam of a gavel, and in that instant I knew I wasn't his priority anymore. I wasn't even his choice. His loyalty belonged to her now. As I packed, each sweater folded felt like a funeral. Each pair of shoes slipped into the suitcase was another piece of betrayal stitched into leather. I didn't cry, not then. The shock was too heavy, the silence too sharp. When the door finally closed behind me, the night air hit like ice, and there I was, standing on the porch of the home I had poured years into, reduced to nothing more than a stranger holding a suitcase. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of her triumphant smirk. That was the cruelest part. Not just that he believed her lies, but that she enjoyed watching him turn against me. She wanted me gone, and now she had won. But betrayal has a strange way of planting seeds. In that moment, while I stood there humiliated, my world collapsing around me, a thought sprouted deep inside. This would not be the end. I would not crawl back. I would not beg for scraps of the love I had once been given. No, this was the beginning of something else entirely. The first week I stayed at a friend's spare room, staring at the ceiling every night until dawn. I replayed every detail of that night, every cruel word, every look of disgust in his eyes. At first, I wished desperately that my phone would light up with a message from him saying he had realized the truth. But it never came. Instead, what lit up my screen were his daughter's mocking posts on social media, little captions designed to cut me deeper. "Some women never learn their place." A photo of her and her father smiling like they hadn't just ripped my world apart. For a moment, it broke me. I curled up on that small bed, shaking with the weight of humiliation, wondering if I had ever truly mattered to him at all. But pain has a way of sharpening a person. It takes your broken edges and turns them into blades. The more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just her lie that destroyed me. It was his choice to believe it, his silence, his betrayal, his... By the second week, something inside me had shifted. The tears dried up, replaced by a cold clarity I hadn't known I possessed. The version of me who begged for his love, who tried endlessly to prove herself in a house that never wanted her, that woman had died the night he slammed the door. What remained was someone else, someone colder, someone stronger. I pulled out the box of documents I had tucked away years ago, a collection of receipts, bank transfers, contracts, property records. Proof of my contributions to everything we had built together. He thought he could throw me out with nothing, that he could erase me with a single command. But he had underestimated me. The third week brought a strange peace. I cooked my own meals, sat in silence, and planned. Each day I grew steadier, stronger, colder. By the time he finally showed up at my friend's door, guilt written across his face like smeared ink, I was ready. "Alina," he said softly, almost tenderly, "I think we both need to reflect. Maybe it's time you apologize and come home." Apologize. As if I had been the problem. As if the betrayal had been mine. His audacity was almost laughable. I smiled, calm and deliberate, and handed him an envelope I had prepared days before. His hands shook as he opened it. Divorce papers. For the first time, it was him standing in the cold. His laugh was nervous, strained, the sound of a man realizing the ground beneath his feet was gone. Alina, this is ridiculous. We don't need to go this far. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded, my voice steady. You believed her lies without even asking me once. You threw me out like trash, and now you expect me to apologize? His eyes darted toward the hallway where she appeared smug as ever, arms crossed, her poison dripping into the air between us. Good, she sneered. Finally, she's leaving for good. She was always jealous of me anyway. Her words didn't sting this time. They fueled me. Because I saw it, the first flicker of unease in his eyes. For the first time, her grin didn't soothe him. It unsettled him. And I knew then that the cracks in their alliance were already forming. I whispered only 2 words as I closed the door on them. You'll regret this. They thought that by casting me aside they had won. But what they didn't know was that I had already begun setting everything in motion. My silence was not surrender, it was preparation. Because revenge isn't fire, it isn't loud or fast. It's ice. It waits. It chills. And when it spreads, it consumes everything in its path. The weeks bled into months, and with each passing day, I felt myself harden in ways I hadn't known were possible. At first, the thought of being without him haunted me, the years I had given, the sacrifices I had made, the trust I had poured into a man who could discard me so easily. But then the betrayal sharpened into something else, resolve. I rented a small apartment on the edge of town, the kind with peeling paint and a humming fridge that never quite kept things cold. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I arranged furniture without asking someone else's opinion. I bought cheap curtains, hung my own photos, filled the place with my scent, my choices, my presence. It felt like building myself from ashes. But even as I rebuilt, the world outside didn't forget me. Word spread quickly, carried on whispers and pitying glances. At the grocery store, neighbors avoided eye contact, murmuring behind their carts. Some shook their heads, muttering, "Poor Alina must have done something awful to be thrown out like that." Others smiled too sweetly, their sympathy dripping with curiosity. I wanted to scream that I wasn't the villain, that I wasn't the liar, but I bit my tongue. Let them think what they wanted. Truth has a way of finding its stage. Meanwhile, his daughter basked in her victory. Social media became her weapon, each post a knife twisted deeper. Pictures of her and her father at dinner, captions about finally being free of toxic energy, subtle jabs meant for me to see. At first, I burned with rage, but then I began to notice something else. The smiles weren't as bright as they used to be. The captions grew more defensive, as if she was trying too hard to prove their happiness. And buried in the comments were whispers of doubt from their so-called friends. Strange how quickly she moved in. Wasn't that Alina's place? The facade was cracking. It was around then that I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but one recommended by a woman I had met at a support group, someone who had fought her own battle against betrayal and come out stronger. His name was Mr. Levin, and he was sharp in a way that made me feel both nervous and safe. The first time we sat across from each other, he spread my documents across his polished desk, eyebrows lifting as he read. "You kept everything," he said, almost impressed. I nodded. Every receipt, every contract, every transfer. He thought I wasn't paying attention, but I was. Mr. Levin smiled faintly. "Then we have a case, a strong one." Hearing those words felt like oxygen after drowning. For so long, I had believed I was powerless, that I was at the mercy of his choices, his lies, his daughter's venom. But now, for the first time, I saw a path. A way to reclaim what was mine, not just the money, not just the house, but my dignity. When the divorce papers were officially filed, his reaction was exactly what I expected. My phone lit up that night, message after message. At first there was anger. "You'll regret this, Alina. You're making a mistake." Then came mockery. "No one will believe you. Everyone knows you're unstable." And finally the pleading. "Please, let's just talk. Don't drag this into court." I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I poured myself into preparation. I spent hours in Mr. Levin's office reviewing every detail of our finances, recounting years of my contributions, every unpaid hour I had worked for his company, every investment I had helped secure, every bill I had covered when he fell short. The paper trail was undeniable. I wasn't just his wife. I had been his partner, in building the very empire he thought he could keep without me. The first court hearing arrived like a storm. I walked into that cold, echoing chamber with my head high, my hands steady, my grandmother's bracelet around my wrist for strength. Across the aisle sat my husband, his daughter perched beside him like a queen guarding her throne. She smirked when she saw me, a cruel little twist of lips meant to remind me she thought she had already won. But as the proceedings began, something shifted. My lawyer's voice was calm, precise, laying out evidence piece by piece, like bricks building a fortress. My husband's attorney sputtered, scrambling to counter, but each time they tried, Mr. Levin slid another document across the table, another signature, another damning fact. And then came the moment that silenced the room. The judge leaned forward, reviewing a stack of papers Mr. Levin had just presented. According to these records, Mrs. Alina was not only a co-signer on the business loan, but also contributed personal savings to secure it. Is this correct? My husband's face drained of color. He stammered something about misunderstandings and family support, but the judge's gaze was unrelenting. For the first time, the power dynamic shifted. It wasn't me on trial anymore, it was him. And his daughter's smirk faltered just slightly as she realized the tide was turning. That night, I didn't celebrate. I sat in my apartment staring out the window at the city lights, feeling both victorious and hollow. Winning in court didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't erase the nights I had cried myself to sleep, the mornings I had woken to silence instead of love. But it was something. It was proof that I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't powerless. As the weeks of hearings stretched on, cracks began to show in their alliance. His daughter, once smug and certain, grew restless. I caught whispers in the courtroom of arguments between them, of her demanding more control, more promises, more validation. My husband, burdened by mounting legal pressure, snapped at her in public, once his voice harsh enough to turn heads. It was then I realized something profound: I didn't need to destroy them. They were destroying themselves. My only task was to stand tall and let the truth do its work. The hearings stretched on, each one peeling back another layer of the life I had once believed in. What struck me most wasn't just the evidence, though. Every bank statement and contract felt like a blade carving away his lies. It was watching him unravel in real time. This man, who once commanded every room he entered, now stumbled over words, his voice cracking under questions he couldn't dodge. I remember one afternoon vividly. The courtroom was hushed, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and tension. Mr. Levin handed the judge a folder containing my employment records, proof of the countless unpaid hours I had poured into my husband's company. I had been more than a wife. I had been an invisible partner. The judge flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable, before finally lifting his gaze. Mrs. Alina contributed significant labor to the success of this business without compensation, he said firmly. This must be considered in the division of assets. My husband's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but the damage was done. I felt a tremor run through me, not fear, but something close to vindication. For years I had been dismissed as just the wife my efforts erased, my sacrifices invisible. Now, in black and white before the eyes of the law, my worth was undeniable. His daughter, seated beside him, couldn't hide her disgust. She leaned in, whispering furiously into his ear, her nails digging into her designer clutch. I didn't need to hear the words to know what she was saying. To her, I was the enemy who refused to disappear quietly. To her, I was proof that her hold over him was slipping. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the day in my head. The way his eyes had darted, the way her smirk had finally cracked. I should have felt triumphant, and in a way I did. But beneath the surface was a deeper ache. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about the years I had given to a man who could so easily discard me. This was about love turned into a weapon, trust shattered into shards sharp enough to cut my soul. I thought of the woman I had been, the one who cooked his meals, managed his books, soothed his temper, believed in his promises. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone who had been forged in fire and ice, who knew the taste of betrayal and the strength of survival. The turning point came during a cross-examination. His attorney tried to paint me as bitter, a scorned wife out for revenge. He asked if I was exaggerating my contributions, if I was twisting the narrative to punish a man who no longer loved me. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady clear. I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came here because the truth deserves to be heard. I built that life, I earned my place, and I refuse to be erased. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the judge seemed to pause, as if letting the words settle into the wood and stone of the room. My husband couldn't meet my gaze. His daughter glared daggers, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was declaring myself. As the case drew toward its climax, whispers spread beyond the courtroom. Neighbors, friends, even business associates began to take notice. The story of the devoted wife discarded for a daughter's lies, only to rise in court with undeniable proof, was too dramatic to ignore. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain in their gossip anymore. I was the woman who had been wronged, and who was now standing her ground. But justice is never a clean process. There were nights when exhaustion pulled me under, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if it was worth it. Nights when the weight of loneliness pressed so hard I could barely breathe. I missed the idea of love, the comfort of belonging, even if it had been false. And in those moments I almost faltered. Almost, because then I would remember that night, his cold voice telling me to pack my things. Her triumphant smirk framed in the doorway, and the ache hardened into steel again. I couldn't go back. I wouldn't go back. By the final hearing, the tension was palpable. The judge reviewed the mountain of evidence one last time. My hands trembled in my lap, not from fear, but from anticipation. When he finally spoke, his words carved through the silence like thunder. Given the substantial contributions Mrs. Alina made, both financial and non-financial, she is entitled to a significant share of the marital assets, including partial ownership of the company. The words echoed in my ears: partial ownership, recognition, justice. My husband's face twisted in disbelief, his mouth opening as if to protest, but no words came out. His daughter's fury was visible, her nails clawing at her chair, her carefully curated world collapsing before her eyes. I sat still, my breathing steady, my heart pounding like a war drum. This was it. Not just a legal victory, but a moral one. Proof that no matter how they lied, how they schemed, how they tried to erase me, I had risen and I had won. As we filed out of the courtroom, my husband stumbled, reaching for me, as if he could still tether me to him. Alina, please. But I didn't stop. I didn't even look at him. Because in that moment I realized something profound. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself. And I had done just that. The judgment reverberated through our lives like an earthquake. On the surface, it was about numbers, percentages of assets, property titles, ownership stakes. But underneath it was about power, and for the first time in a long time, the power was no longer his. It was mine. The days that followed were filled with paperwork and signatures, each pen stroke cutting another tie to the life I had once built under his roof. Lawyers spoke in clipped tones, accountants filed documents, and yet amid all the technical language, I could feel the emotional weight of every decision. Every dollar awarded, every share of the company transferred, was not just restitution, it was recognition. Proof that I had mattered. Proof that I had been real. Word spread quickly. Whispers about the divorce spilled into his business circles, leaked into dinner parties, trickled through our neighborhood like spilled wine staining a white tablecloth. People who once saw me as just the wife now looked at me differently, curiously, almost with respect. They didn't say it out loud, but I could feel it in the way they shifted when I walked into a room. She survived. She fought back. My husband, on the other hand, withered before my eyes. Each time I saw him in court or across negotiation tables, his shoulders seemed to slump further. His face, once so full of arrogance, was carved with exhaustion. I could almost see the realization dawning on him piece by piece that his blind loyalty to his daughter had cost him everything. And her, his daughter, she never stopped glaring at me. She walked into each hearing with her head high, her lips curled in disdain, but the cracks were there. Her eyes darted nervously, her foot tapped impatiently, her whispers to him grew sharper, louder. Once in a hallway outside the courtroom, I caught her voice rising. "This is your fault. You should have listened to me." The irony nearly made me laugh. But what surprised me most was the moment I stopped feeling angry at her. She had been the spark, yes, but he had been the one to fan the flames. She lied, but he chose to believe her. She pushed, but he let himself be pushed. My betrayal wasn't hers alone, it was his. And realizing that freed me in a way nothing else had. The settlement gave me more than I ever expected. With my share of the assets, I could have disappeared to a new city, started fresh built walls so high that no one could ever hurt me again. And for a while I considered it. But then I thought of all the women I had met in those support groups, all the voices I had heard trembling in the dark, each one echoing my own story, discarded, betrayed, silenced. So I made a choice. I took part of my settlement and created a foundation, a scholarship fund for women rebuilding after abandonment, a place where shattered futures could find new beginnings. Every time I signed a new grant or read a thank you letter from a recipient, I felt something mend inside me. A piece of the broken woman I had been was piecing herself back together, not with vengeance but with purpose. Meanwhile, his world kept unraveling. The company suffered without me, contracts falling through employees leaving. His daughter, once his pride and joy, began to distance herself when the money ran thin. I heard rumors of fights, of screaming matches, of her storming out and slamming doors. The alliance that had cast me out was crumbling, devouring itself from the inside. One afternoon I ran into him at the bank. He looked older, his suit rumpled, his eyes sunken. For a brief moment our gazes met and I saw something I hadn't seen in years: regret. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but I turned away. There was nothing left for me to hear. That night I visited the small office of my foundation. The walls were lined with photos of young women smiling with diplomas in hand, their futures shining brightly. I stood there in the quiet, tears filling my eyes, not of sorrow, but of pride. This was my legacy now. Not the years wasted in a loveless marriage, not the betrayal that had once defined me, but the strength that had risen from it. I whispered into the silence, almost as if speaking to the ghost of the woman I had once been. We made it. We're free. And for the first time I believed it, because revenge had never been about destroying them. It was about saving myself. And I had done just that, completely, irrevocably, beautifully. If this story has touched you, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from those you trusted, most know this: you are not alone. You are stronger than you think, braver than you realize, and capable of rising even from the deepest wounds. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you believe in stories of resilience and truth, and leave a comment below, tell me your story, your survival, your victory. Because together, our voices become louder than any betrayal.